All right, we're taping. Today is good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, the 12th of October, and I just want to spend literally about 5 minutes before we go on reviewing yesterday. I did put out, and I sent you this in the email you got after class yesterday. I did send out or set up a repo that had everything we'd done so far. So in other words, it had the MongoDB driver one that we did and the MongoDB Mongoose one that we did. The only thing I want to quickly say, and I mentioned it yesterday, but I want to say it again today about the Mongo driver one is please make sure if you do want to run it and make sure that it works, do it very incrementally. And what I mean is come in here and when you do your create, all right, make sure this only runs one time, all of this stuff. All right, and take everything that's down below it, all the read and all the update and all the delete stuff, comment all of it out. All right, then once you've done that and you've got those three records and you verified that they're there, then comment out all the create stuff. All right, and then uncomment your read stuff. There's just a couple lines here to make sure that it worked. Then comment that out, uncomment your update stuff to make sure all of that works. All right, then comment that out, and finally uncomment your delete stuff. So all I'm saying is when you go back to run the driver part, I put everything in here. So the entire project has got everything. And it may or may not work, but you're always best off. You're always best off to go in there and see whether or not things work. All right, so do something, do the create, check and make sure it works. Do the read, make sure, check it, make sure it works. Do the update, check it, make sure it works. Do the delete, check it, and make sure it works. And as you get through these things, comment out what you were working on, uncomment out what you want to work on next. Okay, so we did that. Then we got in and we started to work on this other one. Okay, and again, just as a little bit of review, because we're going to finish this one up right now. Okay, and that is you saw that in the first instance we required MongoDB, and we did this a little bit differently. And again, typically using the driver isn't the way of doing things. Typically you use Mongoose as we're doing in here. And next week when we come in, well, really starting tomorrow, we're going to be using Express with this. We're going to make this a regular node project. Right now, for lack of better words, it's more, it is a node project, but since we're not using Express, all right, it's a, it's an MN project, meaning we're going to be using Mongoose and we're going to be using Node. Starting tomorrow, when we will be working on this to-do list, all right, what we're going to do then is we're going to make a MEN project, meaning we're going to have Mongo, we're going to have Express, and we're going to have Node. We're going to get that to a certain point, and I'm going to let you work on it. I'm going to give you next week another assignment that I want you to be doing, again, another MEN stack assignment, so to speak, and you'll get some lab time to work on it. But then hopefully, starting a week from Monday, all right, we are going to start working on React, all right, and you are going to start writing some React applications. At first, again, they'll be fairly simplistic, but then we want to bring everything together and have the entire MERN stack in there. So we will do some kind of a MERN stack project as a class, and we'll get started on doing, it'll be an e-commerce or some other kind of site, and you're going to be able to do that on anything you want. All right, I've already started. I'm probably going to modify the one that I did last year, where I basically sold hats. Okay, baseball hats, football hats, etc., that kind of thing. It's probably what we're going to end up doing. But if you want to modify that, and I wish you would, then you can sell basically anything that you want to sell. Okay, so with that
Mr.
said,
Pat,
yes.
So with that e-commerce site, like when you go to sell stuff, would you actually be able to put like your credit card information and like buy it, or is that like
Okay,
too
the
far?
question was, how realistic is this going to be? And the answer is this. So you tell me if I'm answering your question or not. PayPal has what's called a sandbox, which means you can actually put in regular things like you're making an order, but it doesn't really go anywhere. You understand what I'm saying? So you can do validations on credit cards and stuff like that. But for example, I think with a MasterCard, it's 16 numbers. All right. With other credit cards, it might be something else. So yes and no. And what I mean again is yes, you will be able to actually make it seem like you're making purchases, but no, you're not actually going to be selling stuff. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that's at least that's what I hope we're going to be able to do. I see no reason why we can't. All right. So we connected to Mongoose, and you already heard, since we're working on our own machine, that the port we're going to be using is 27017. And as you can see there in line 2, all right, we made this books database. I am going to recommend that from now on, just make everything you do lowercase. So I really should have done it more like this. It's fine the way it is. It should work just fine the way it is. All right, but I'm just going to recommend, if you want to make everything, even like in here, like, anything you name, if you want to call this book schema like that, I don't care. Again, what you should end up doing is you should start developing your own style of doing this stuff. All right. Again, I know we've talked about this kind of thing before. All right. So we created the schema, and in the schema right there, each book had a title, a number of pages, a rating, and a review. Later, we went back, and rather than writing just a typical schema where we had 4 fields that basically looked like this, we went back in and we brought validation into the mix. When you bring in validation, you have to specify a type. If you do not put any extra validation in, you don't have to specify a type. All right, the word type is what I'm talking about. And we did look at yesterday, I showed you on the mongoosejs.com validation page under the read the docs, the different types of the different data types that exist, including, for example, the array data type. All right. Then we came in and we looked at some of the other stuff like with a required. All right. So if required is set to true, that means that if you don't put it in, this is what's going to happen. The program should error out right there with that message. Same kind of thing with the pages if you don't put a pages in there. For the pages, since it's a numeric field, we also went in and we put in a min and a max. All right. And again, those are very arbitrary numbers. I just made those up. All right. Rating, it seemed to me, typically when you rate something, we could have made the minimum 0, but I just made it 1 to 5. All right. So we did all that. And then after we created the schema, we created a model based off of that schema. All right. And it's mongoose.model as is shown right here. So again, we're going to be running through a pattern where you're going to be creating a schema. All right, you're going to be creating a model based off of that schema. And then starting next week is we're going to be taking this and putting it into its own folder and in its own file in its own folder. And we're going to be exporting it so that our app.js doesn't keep exploding in size. All right. So after we did that, we created some instances. In other words, we created some documents based off of the book, which ends up being books collection, lowercase. And again, my names weren't good, but I think they were pretty self-descriptive. WAP for War and Peace, ACC for A Christmas Carol, etc. All right. I did not go through the process of actually bringing this up just because I thought yesterday the period just seemed like it was kind of getting out of control and it was getting too long. So I did not go in and put that in there basically. All right. But you really should go back in, and I think I said this yesterday, try leaving out the title and make sure you get an error message with that message in there. Title is required. Try leaving off the pages and see. Try putting your pages in where it's out of either a number that's less than 10 or greater than 1,000. Really, you should do both. All right. For a rating, put in a number less than 1 and one that's greater than 5. And again, you should still make valid tests like I'm showing here. All right. The review, we didn't do anything. You can even leave that off and it'll work just fine. So we did that. Then we came in and we started talking about how to do the different CRUD operations with this stuff. All right. Again, be cognizant of the fact that when you do this, what you're doing here is you're using the name of your model dot, then whatever MongoDB method you want to use. All right. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I showed you this. If you look under models, under the mongoosejs.com, read the docs, and you go out to the models, it shows you all the different inserts, finds, updates, and deletes you can use. And for each one of the ones that are in there, you are also shown both the syntax for it and an example that you can use. All right. Many of these, as shown in the one here on line 53, all right, in this case, we have to provide what? We have to provide an array of all the possible things we want to insert, but it can always error. Most of these, maybe not all, but most of them are always going to say in here that you've got an error in there as a parameter, because any database operation that you try can conceivably error out. And really just doing a console.error, as I think I mentioned this yesterday, probably isn't the best way to handle this. In other words, what we really should be doing is something like a res.send status. And if something doesn't exist, and if it's on our side, maybe a 404, all right, with an error message. And if it's on the server side, a 500 with some kind of an error message. All right. I also mentioned yesterday that typically when you're doing this in an actual application type of atmosphere, you put the console.log statements in there, and you put them in there while you're testing. You take them out after you've done the testing. All right. So we went through that, and that was our insert. Then we went in and we added another schema. And that second schema that we added was an author schema. All right. And that author schema was set up. We did put in a little bit of stuff in here, but basically we could have made the first name, last name, and age required. Age probably would be the one that wouldn't need to be required. All right. So in other words, we really could have just set it up with a first name being required, a last name being required. But for an age, if we wanted to make it required, we could. But again, that would be another one where we would typically set a minimum and a maximum. All right. Then we went in after we created the schema, which again is very simplistic. All right. Then we went in and created a model based off of that schema. And again, we went back in and we added records, and those records basically do correspond to the author's records, or I should say author's documents, correspond to the book documents that we did earlier. Then we went through, and again, we did a create with an insert many to bring in those 4 records. I should say again, 4 documents. Then we did a read to try to read the 4 documents. All right. And we put in here, just to show that this could be done, a for each, because we didn't need all that information. We only wanted to see the titles. All right. I did mention that as you go through this, excuse me, as you go through this, what you should want to do then is have your Mongo shell running, of course, and your Mongodb running. Always bring up Mongodb first We've talked about that before. But inside of the shell, all right, inside of the shell, run these commands or commands like these to make sure that everything you're doing has been working. I should mention to you also that I did finally get an email back from Mongodb help. And basically it came back and it said exactly, I said, I've been trying to clear the screen and it doesn't work. I said, CLS doesn't work, clear doesn't work, console.clear doesn't work. I've heard Control L works, that didn't work. I've heard Control K works, that didn't work. So the lady wrote back and said, well, CLS or console.clear should work. And I wrote back again saying, well, they don't. All right. And then she wrote back and said, well, if you're still having problems, and she said, this service is really for paying customers, which I thought that basically they'd come back and tell me. And she said, but here are some help pages that might help you. And basically all it was she just pushed me back to the install page. So I still don't like the fact that when we are working in the console here, we can't clear the screen. I think that stinks, but we're working with it. So, all right. Then after we came in and did the create and the read for authors, we came in and this is where we finished up yesterday. We did the update and we did the delete. All right. And again, be very cognizant of a couple things here. If we had tons of books in this database, what we would want to do first would be, for example, to do something like a books.find, and we would want to check for War and Peace. Then we would want to go in and we'd want to get the ID. And rather than doing this update based on a title or doing the delete based on a title, we would want to do the update or a delete. You always want to do those based on the ID. I'm just doing it like this because we had just 4 records in there. So there wasn't a lot of stuff, so to speak, that we had to work on. All right. Now, there's one more thing that I wanted to show you in here because that was it as far as what we talked about yesterday. All right. Now, with what I'm about to show you, and it may not make any sense right now, but what I'm going to do is very quickly, I'm going to take the author stuff that we did yesterday. No, I'm not going to remove any of it, but I'm going to take all of the author stuff that we did yesterday. You do not have to do this, but I'm going to take every bit of it and I'm going to cut it to the clipboard. All right. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it above my book stuff. All right. I'm taking my author stuff and I'm putting it above my book stuff. Now, a natural question would be, okay, you're doing that. Can I ask you why you're doing that? All right. And I'm going to tell you exactly right now what I did and why I did it. All right. So what we want to do then is we want to go into our book schema. All right. We want to go into our book schema. And I'm going to come in here. And as you can see, nothing new here. I haven't changed a thing. All right. But right now, there is really no way that we can forge any kind of a relationship between the two collections, between our books and our authors. So what I'm going to show you right now is how we can do that. All right. So we've got this schema in here. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to add another field to this schema right here. And I'm going to call this, all right, author of this book. And the reason I'm calling it that's not a good name. But the reason that I'm calling it that is what I want to put in here, all right, is author schema. So what I have done is I have taken the schema from up here, this schema, and I have brought that in to my books stuff. And you might say, well, is that really a big deal? Well, what I should now have access to, all right, is all of the author information inside of my books. And you might say, well, is that a big deal? Okay, well, fortunately or unfortunately, I spent last night going back and rewriting 2 different C# programs, because the ones that I had written that I was going to use today, I found out that there was a bad error in them. So I'm not making an excuse. I'm just being honest with you. So I wanted to come in and show you some examples of this. I didn't have time to do it. So I will do it, and I will write some, I promise, and we will go over them tomorrow before we go over and start this to-do list app. All right. I also want to mention to you, you may or may not be aware of this. 2 times a year at Rankin Technical College, the Information Technology or IT department has an advisory committee meeting. On the meeting that we have in fall, we have it at St. Louis, and we have anywhere from ideally 10 to 15 employers, all right, come to the meeting, and they tell us, we go over the program with them, and they say what's working and what's not working. Well, 2 years ago, Mr. Gudmested had the wise idea, and it was a wise idea. Why don't we change when we have the advisory committee, which had always been at night, and we started it at 7 o'clock, and it was tough because some people had to come right from work. But he said, what if we do it on the same day as the job fair? And we'll have some people who will be coming anyway for the job fair. And then what we'll do is the job fair is 9 to 12. And then from 12:15 to 1:30, we'll have the advisory committee meeting. Well, he tried it 2 years ago, and he ended up getting about 15 people. So it worked out pretty well. The bad news about those 15 people who came in is 14 of them were for the hardware program, and only 1 had anything to do with the AWD program. But Evan keeps working on it and working on it. So bottom line is this. Tomorrow is the job fair. If you didn't know that, if you do plan on going, I'm not asking if you're going or not. You do what you want to do. You might say, I'm not graduating till May. I'll go to the one in spring. Cool. Then do that. All right. But for anybody either watching this live or watching this on tape, I will tell you that even though it starts at 9, the people who are going to be working at the job fair, the potential employers, they start getting there at 7 a.m. So if you plan on going tomorrow and you want to be able to park inside of Rankin in one of the lots inside of Rankin, this is Rankin St. Louis, not Rankin Wentzville, you really should try to be there by 7. All right. Now, that all said, I talked to Mr. Corrigan this morning, and I said, hey, am I supposed to be going to this? I want to know, because if I've got to drive down to St. Louis, I want to be able to do that. I got to leave early enough, et cetera, et cetera. He said, geez, I don't really know. I don't know what Evan thinks as far as you being there or not being there. Why don't you email him? So I did. And Evan got back to me very quickly, which is great. And he said, we have 1 person coming to the advisory committee meeting tomorrow who cannot be there live, all right, in person. So we're doing it in Teams. So he said, I will send you out that Teams link, and no, you do not have to come in. But I am still supposed to come to the meeting tomorrow. So what I'm telling you is the class tomorrow will start no earlier than 1:30, because from 12:30 till it's supposed to be 12:15 to 1:30, but I'll bug out at about 1:25. All right. And we will start the class at that time. Okay. But until then, I'm going to be in that meeting. So we won't start, like I said, until 1:30. I would strongly recommend that if you can fit it into your schedule, that you go to the job fair tomorrow at St. Louis. All right. Again, you got to do what you want to do. I understand. Even if you're not graduating until May, if nothing else, there'll be anywhere between 25 and 50 possible employers there for AWD graduates. Have resumes. All right. Hopefully you can go and print them out. If you can't, all right. I mean, I can print out stuff for you here tomorrow, but then you'll have to come into the Wentzville campus to get it. All right. And otherwise, you can, if you want to, you can contact Mr. Gudmested, and he is at, just so you see it, he is at EA Gudmested at rankin.edu. All right. And either he will be able to print them out for you, or he will be able to point you in a direction where somebody will be able to. If you've got your own printer at home, then do that. Now, let's say, well, I don't have time to do that, et cetera, et cetera. I want to come to the job. Then don't bring resumes. All right. But you may be asked, if you talk to a potential employer, do you have a resume? All right. And again, like I said, maybe this is a moot point. If you know, somebody watching this either live or on tape says, well, I'm not graduating until May, so I'm not going to go anyway. Fine. But I would make the same recommendations if you go to the one in spring, which is typically in early April, that you have resumes printed out, etc. All right. Have your portfolio updated. Link to your portfolio and your resume, at least put the URL in or whatever. All right, that's the end of my sermon. But again, you got to do what you got to do. I get all that stuff. All right. So, like I said, I don't have examples. I'm going to work on them as soon as I get done with this. I want to go back and I'm going to run everything I put in here to make sure there are no errors in anything I put in here. Once I go in and make sure that it all works and there are no errors, I'm going to put in a few more queries that's going to allow us and show us the relationship between the two collections. All right. And then I'm going to upgrade or update my GitHub repo. So I hope to get all that stuff done within an hour or so. All right. So what are we doing for the rest of the class? Well, I've come up with this. I've got another assignment for you. I'm going to email this to you in just a moment, but I want to go through it with you first. All right. Yes, it's due Sunday, but you get the rest of the period today. So we're talking what? 3 hours today plus, and we're talking that you've got time on Friday. This is all that will be due this Sunday. And as it says, this is your second assignment. You can use the project we've been working on, this MongoDB_Mongoose project that we created yesterday, went over today, and I'll update today. Use that as a template, and everything you do, I want you to do using Mongoose. So you will create a brand new Node app. You know, call it whatever you want, but you want to just call it movies, that's fine. All right. The first thing I want you to do is to create a MongoDB database that you can call MoviesDB. And I want you to add your 25 records to that. That might mean that you got to do a little bit of twerking around because your record format currently is in MySQL. But doing that and putting in those 25 movies into your collection, all right, that's going to get you 10 points. Then create a movie schema and make sure that that movie schema includes validation. Make every field required, and for numeric fields, as it says, set minimum and maximum values. And everybody did a little bit different on what they put into their database. So where I said add any other validation you deem necessary, all right, there might be something else that you put in there. If you had running time, all right, as an example, you'd probably want to put a minimum and a maximum in there, something along those lines. All right, then to kind of dovetail with what we've been working on in this project create a rating schema. That's another 10 points. It only has one field in it besides the ID. And that field, set it up as an array and put the value so it'll be a string array with these values. All right. G for general audience, PG for parental guidance, PG 13 for parental guidance 13, R, I'm not even sure what that means. All right, X, and you know what that means. But I know, for example, when I took those 25 greatest movies of all time, there were a couple movies that were real early, like one was about 25 or 28, 1925 or 1928, and it didn't have a rating. So N/A is not applicable, but I'd like you to set that up. All right. And again, I'd like you to set that up as a schema. So for both of these, you will create models. But then I want you to go back into this movie schema model that you will create. And like we just looked at, add the rating schema in there as a new field. So if you have a ratings field in there already, get rid of that and replace it with this. All right. That should allow you to link the two tables together. All right. As it says, this is kind of tough because with what we're working on right now, because a lot of times one or more of you will email me and say, how are we supposed to save this stuff? So I'm telling you how right here, and it's worth 10 of your 50 points. As you work through the assignment, copy everything you do as you get it to work, copy it to a text file, or put it in a text file first, and then copy it over to Mongo Shell. The text file, as it says, is what I want you to upload to your GitHub repo. That's what you will turn in for a grade by Sunday. So the grading, again, will be you setting up, you adding all 25 records into your movie collection. That'll be 10 points. Setting up a schema for this will be 10 points. Setting up a schema and a model, 10 points. Setting up a schema and a model for the ratings will be 10 points. And linking the two together will be 10 points. So that is 10, 20, 30, 40. Documenting everything you've done and turning that in as a simple text file will be the other 10 points. So that's where the 50 points come from. And again, I don't want to read a bit of this to you, okay? Because as it says there, the rest of the class is going to be yours today, and I am going to be on an email. I am, just so you know, I'm going to run over. I'm in one building at the Wentzville campus, and there's no printer here that I can connect to because I don't have the capabilities to go to that network. I have to print out a document. Actually, it's one of them is this document. I always try to proof it one time, and I hate proofing it online like this. So I will send this to you after I go over to the other campus or the other building, which is a 2-minute walk, print everything out, and then walk back again. All right, so then you will have this. Again, tomorrow we'll start at 1:30. I told you why. Tomorrow we'll begin working on the to-do list project. Okay, now this is a very abbreviated class. I only went for 40 minutes. Do any of you who are watching right now have any questions on anything that I've gone over yesterday or today? Anything? All right, and I also let you know then what the schedule is going to be. I don't know if we can finish this whole to-do list tomorrow, considering especially we've only got about 2.5 hours. We'll get done what we can. Friday will be lab. Then we will finish up whatever we have to finish up the following Monday. I will give you some kind of another assignment where you're going to have to basically come in and add your own stuff to this to-do list when we get it to work. There'll be a few other things. I don't want to go through them now. We'll go through them tomorrow, though. All right. Then you're going to get, it's going to be a test. All right. And you will have a good week to work on the test. Okay. So if I pass the test out next Wednesday, it won't be due that Sunday. It'll be due the Sunday after that. You will get at least 2 lab days a week to work on it. I don't want anybody to say, well, we didn't have enough time to do this. I don't want that. All right. So that's what we've got going on. And again, my hope is by no later than the 24th, which is a week from next Monday, we're going to spend a good week just hammering React stuff over and over and over again. We'll do just some simple React. We'll do some more complex React. We'll bring Node back into it more, all right, and work on that. And I know, for example, Clayton, you did some work with Evan with React. And I don't know, and I'm just asking you this, I'm taking for granted you're still on right now. Did you guys use NPX instead of NPM when you did that?
No, we use NPM.
Okay, we're going to use NPX because what that will do is it'll generate a lot of the files that you need, all right, that you need to have. And you can do it with NPM or you can do it with NPX. NPX is just a little nicer in that it does a lot of the work behind the scenes for you. All right. So that's what we'll be doing. And again, my goal then is by no later than, all right, somewhere in the, we're going to say maybe November 1st or November 2nd, somewhere in there, we are going to start on that mean or MERN-stack project. We'll work on that 2 or 3 days a week. And then I'm going to give you your last big assignment, which will be do your own MERN-stack project. And you will get 2 to 3 days a week to work on that. That's what we've got to look forward to then for the rest of the semester. There's probably going to be a couple more things regarding Node that I'll have to bring in that we haven't talked about yet. Maybe some stuff like authorization and authentication and maybe a few other things. But that's pretty much the way I'm trying to lay out the rest of the semester schedule. So again, if there are no other questions, I know it's early, you know what you got to do, get to it. And I'll talk to you tomorrow at 1:30. Thanks.